The courtroom doors swing open, and the bailiff's voice echoes through the chamber with a gravity that silences every whisper in the gallery. All rise for the Honorable Judge Lauren Lake. The audience stands in unison, a sea of curious faces hungry for truth, for justice, for the kind of raw human drama that reminds us all how fragile our carefully constructed lives can be. Judge Lake enters with the commanding presence of someone who has seen every variation of heartbreak, every shade of deception, every desperate plea for vindication that a human heart can produce. She takes her seat behind the bench, her expression neither cold nor sympathetic, but rather that of someone prepared to excavate truth from beneath layers of pain and pride. This is Paternity Court, where the stakes are never just about biology or money or property, but about the very foundation upon which families are built, the trust that binds lovers together, and the innocent children caught in the crossfire of adult dysfunction. The case before the court today is Martinez versus Thompson, and the tension radiating from the plaintiff's table suggests that what we're about to witness is more than a simple eviction dispute or a lover's quarrel gone wrong. No, this is about a woman who opened her home and her heart to a man, who built what she thought was a future with him, only to discover that the foundation beneath that future might have been nothing but sand all along. Judge Lake adjusts her glasses and reviews the file before her, taking in the details with the careful attention of someone who knows that behind every legal document is a human story, messy and complicated and often heartbreaking.
Yeah, miss?
Carmen Martinez, 29 years old, sits at the plaintiff's table with her shoulders squared and her jaw set. But there's something trembling just beneath that facade of strength, something that speaks of sleepless nights and tear, stained pillows, and the particular agony of loving someone you're no longer sure you can trust. Beside her sits her mother, Mrs. Rosa Martinez, a woman whose weathered hands and tired eyes suggest she's fought many battles to protect her daughter, and who is prepared to fight this one too. Across the aisle at the defendant's table sits Marcus Thompson, 30, 2 years old, a man whose casual posture might suggest indifference if not for the way his fingers drum anxiously against the table, if not for the way his eyes keep darting toward Carmen as though searching for some sign of the connection they once shared. The air between the two tables is thick with unspoken accusations, with memories of tender moments now poisoned by suspicion, with the weight of decisions that cannot be unmade. Judge Lake looks up from the file, and her gaze sweeps across both parties, measuring them, reading them the way a scholar reads an ancient text, looking for the truth hidden between the lines. MS. Martinez, she begins, her voice filling the courtroom with an authority that demands attention. You have brought Mr. Thompson to court today, seeking to have him removed from your residence, a home that you purchased with your own money, a home where the two of you have lived together for the past 2 years along with your daughter, 4-year-old Sophia. But this is not merely an eviction case, is it? This is about something much deeper, something that has shaken the very core of what you believed your life to be. Carmen rises slightly in her seat, her voice steady but laced with an emotion that she's clearly been holding back for far too long. Your Honor, she says, I loved this man. I welcomed him into my home, into my life, into my daughter's life. I believed we were building a family together. I believed that he was going to be the father figure that Sophia deserved, the partner that I had been praying for. But I have been lied to, Your Honor. I have been betrayed in the worst possible way, and I will not allow my daughter to grow up watching her mother be disrespected and taken advantage of in her own home. The courtroom seems to hold its collective breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for the revelation that will explain the raw pain in Carmen's voice. Judge Lake leans forward slightly, her expression inviting Carmen to continue, to unburden herself of whatever truth has brought her to this moment. And what is the nature of this betrayal, MS Martinez? What has Mr. Thompson done that has led you to seek his removal from your home? Carmen's eyes flash with a mixture of hurt and anger, and when she speaks again, her words come faster, as though she's been rehearsing them in her mind for weeks, as though she's been waiting for this opportunity to finally be heard. He cheated on me, Your Honor, multiple times with multiple women, and when I confronted him about it, he denied it. He looked me straight in the eye and told me I was crazy, that I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid and insecure. But I found the messages, Your Honor. I found the pictures. I found proof that while I was working overtime to pay the mortgage on that house, while I was cooking his meals and washing his clothes and trying to create a stable home for my daughter, he was out there betraying me in the most fundamental way a partner can betray another. Marcus Thompson shifts in his seat, his jaw tightening, and it's clear that he's been preparing his own defense, his own version of events that will paint him in a more favorable light. But Judge Lake raises a hand, silencing any immediate response, because she knows that in cases like this, the truth emerges not from competing monologues, but from a careful examination of the facts, the timeline, the motivations that drive people to make the choices they make. Mr. Thompson, Judge Lake says, turning her attention to the defendant, you will have your opportunity to respond to these allegations. But first, I want to understand the full scope of what we're dealing with here. Ms. Martinez, when did you and Mr. Thompson begin your relationship? Carmen takes a breath, steadying herself, and begins to recount the story of how they met. A story that probably seemed romantic at the time, but now feels like a cautionary tale. We met 3 years ago, Your Honor, at a mutual friend's barbecue. Marcus was charming, attentive, different from the other men I had dated. He was good with Sophia from the very beginning, and that meant everything to me because Sophia's biological father has never been in her life, has never contributed a dime to her care, has never even tried to be part of her world. When Marcus came along and showed genuine interest in being a father figure to her, I thought I had finally found the man I had been waiting for. Judge Lake nods, her expression thoughtful, because she's heard variations of this story countless times before. The single mother desperate to provide her child with a complete family, the man who seems like the answer to her prayers, the slow unraveling that follows when reality fails to live up to the fantasy. And when did he move into your home? Carmen's mother, Rosa, interjects before her daughter can answer, her voice thick with an accent that speaks of another country, another language, but a universal understanding of what it means to watch your child suffer. Too soon, Your Honor, she says, shaking her head. Way too soon. I told my daughter to wait, to make sure this man was serious, to make sure he was going to be there for the long haul. But she was in love, and when you're in love, you don't always listen to the people who care about you most. Carmen reaches over and squeezes her mother's hand, acknowledging the truth in her words even as she continues her testimony. He moved in after we had been dating for about 8 months, Your Honor, and at first everything was wonderful. He helped with bills, he was good to Sophia, he made me feel like we were a real family. But about 6 months ago, things started to change. Judge Lake leans back in her chair, her fingers steepled beneath her chin, and asks the question that everyone in the courtroom is wondering. What changed, Ms. Martinez? What was the catalyst that transformed your relationship from something you believed was wonderful into something you now characterize as a betrayal? Carmen's voice wavers for the first time, and it's clear that what she's about to say costs her something. Costs her pride. Costs her the image she had of herself as a woman who would never be foolish enough to be taken advantage of. He started coming home late, Your Honor, started making excuses about why he couldn't contribute to bills the way he used to, started being distant, cold, like his mind was somewhere else even when his body was in the same room. And then I started finding things, little things at first, a receipt from a restaurant I knew we hadn't gone to together, a perfume smell on his shirt that wasn't my perfume, phone calls that he would take outside, away from me, as though whatever he was discussing was too private to share with the woman he claimed to love. The pain in her voice is palpable, and several members of the audience shift in their seats, some nodding in recognition because they too have experienced the slow erosion of trust. The terrible suspicion that grows like a cancer when the person you love begins to act like a stranger. Judge Lake allows the moment to breathe, allows the emotion to settle over the courtroom like a heavy blanket before she continues her questioning. And when you confronted him about these suspicions, what was his response? Carmen's laugh is bitter, devoid of any humor. He called me crazy, Your Honor. He said I was being paranoid, that I was looking for problems where there weren't any. He said that I was so traumatized by Sophia's father abandoning us that I couldn't trust any man, that I was projecting my insecurities onto him. And for a while, I almost believed him. I almost convinced myself that maybe he was right, that maybe I was seeing things that weren't there. But then I found his phone unlocked one night when he was in the shower, and I looked through his messages, and what I found confirmed every suspicion I had ever had. There were multiple women, Your Honor, multiple conversations that were explicit, that were romantic, that proved beyond any doubt that he was living a double life while eating the food I bought, sleeping in the bed I paid for, and playing daddy to my daughter. Marcus Thompson can no longer contain himself, and he rises partially from his seat, his voice raised in protest in defense of himself and his version of reality. "That's not fair, Carmen," he exclaims, and Judge Lake's gavel comes down with a sharp crack that echoes through the courtroom like a gunshot. "Mr. Thompson," Judge Lake says, her voice sharp as a blade, "you will sit down and you will wait your turn. This is my courtroom, and we will proceed in an orderly fashion. Do you understand?" Marcus nods reluctantly and sinks back into his chair, but the fire in his eyes suggests that he has plenty to say when given the opportunity. Judge Lake returns her attention to Carmen, her expression softening slightly because she can see the toll this is taking on the woman before her, can see the way her hands tremble despite her attempts to appear strong. "Ms. Martinez, after you discovered these messages, what did you do?" Carmen takes a deep breath, gathering herself, and continues, "I confronted him immediately, Your Honor. I didn't wait. I didn't try to gather more evidence. I just showed him what I had found and demanded an explanation. And do you know what he did? He tried to turn it around on me. He said that I had violated his privacy by going through his phone, that I was the one who was wrong, that if I had just trusted him like a good girlfriend should, then everything would have been fine. He barely even acknowledged the cheating, Your Honor. He was more concerned with the fact that I had looked through his phone than with the fact that he had been betraying me for God knows how long." The frustration and disbelief in Carmen's voice resonates with many in the audience, particularly the women who have experienced similar gaslighting, similar attempts by unfaithful partners to make themselves into the victim when they are clearly the perpetrator. Judge Lake shakes her head, a gesture of both disappointment and recognition. "And yet you did not immediately ask him to leave. Why is that?" Carmen's shoulders slump slightly, and when she speaks, there's a note of shame in her voice, the shame of someone who knows she should have acted differently, but understands why she didn't. "Because I loved him, Your Honor. Because Sophia had grown attached to him and called him Daddy, and I didn't want to disrupt her life again. Because part of me hoped that if he saw how much he had hurt me, if he saw how much damage he had done, he would change. He promised me he would change, Your Honor. He cried, he apologized, he swore on everything that mattered to him that it would never happen again, that he would be the man I deserved, the father Sophia deserved. And fool that I was, I believed him." The self-recrimination in her voice is painful to hear, and Judge Lake's expression shows both empathy and a hint of frustration, because she has seen this pattern so many times before. The cycle of betrayal and forgiveness that traps good people in bad situations. How long did this reconciliation last, Ms. Martinez? Carmen wipes at her eyes, refusing to let the tears fall, refusing to give Marcus the satisfaction of seeing her completely break down. "About 2 months, Your Honor. 2 months of him being on his best behavior, of him being attentive and apologetic and seemingly committed to rebuilding what he had destroyed, And then I caught him again. This time it wasn't even messages, Your Honor. This time I came home early from work because I wasn't feeling well. And I found a woman's belongings in my bathroom, a woman's hair on my pillow, evidence that he had brought someone into my home, into the bed I sleep in, while my daughter was at school. The courtroom erupts in a chorus of gasps and murmurs, and Judge Lake has to strike her gavel again to restore order. Marcus's face has gone red, and he's shaking his head vigorously, his mouth opening and closing as though he wants to speak but can't quite find the words. Carmen's mother, Rosa, is openly crying now, her hands covering her face as she relives the moment when her daughter called her from that house, broken and betrayed in the most intimate way possible. Judge Lake allows the emotion to flow for a moment, understanding that this is not just a legal proceeding but a human reckoning. A moment when all the pain and betrayal and shattered trust comes pouring out into the light of day. Ms. Martinez, Judge Lake says gently, I can see how difficult this is for you, but I need you to tell me what happened next. Carmen straightens in her seat, and when she speaks again, there's steel in her voice, the steel of a woman who has decided that enough is enough, that she will not be anyone's doormat or fool. I told him to leave, Your Honor. I told him to pack his things and get out of my house immediately, but he refused. He said that he had lived there for 2 years, that he had rights as a tenant, that I couldn't just throw him out on the street without following proper legal procedures. He actually had the audacity to quote tenant law to me, while standing in my bedroom where he had just been with another woman. So I called the police, Your Honor, but they told me the same thing, that because he had been living there and receiving mail there, I would have to go through the formal eviction process. And that's why I'm here today, Your Honor, because I want him out of my house, out of my life, and away from my daughter. And I want it done legally so that he can never claim I did anything wrong. Judge Lake turns her attention to Marcus Thompson, and the weight of her gaze seems to press down on him like a physical force. Mr. Thompson, she says, you have heard Ms. Martinez's testimony. You have heard her describe a pattern of infidelity, of betrayal, of disrespect within a home that she owns and pays for. What do you have to say for yourself? Marcus stands, and there's a defensive quality to his posture, a readiness to fight back against accusations that he clearly believes are exaggerated or unfair. Your Honor, he begins, I'm not going to sit here and pretend I'm perfect. I made mistakes, I own that. But Carmen is painting a picture of me as some kind of monster who used her and disrespected her, and that's not the whole truth. When I moved into that house, I was contributing. I was paying bills, I was helping with Sophia, I was trying to be the man she needed. But Carmen is controlling, Your Honor. She wanted to know where I was every minute of every day. She would go through my phone, my wallet, my car, looking for evidence of things that weren't even happening. The constant accusations, the constant mistrust, it wore me down. It made me feel like no matter what I did, it was never going to be enough for her. The classic deflection strategy, the attempt to make the victim responsible for the perpetrator's choices. And Judge Lake's expression shows that she recognizes it immediately. But she allows him to continue because fairness demands that both sides be heard, that even those who have clearly done wrong be given the opportunity to explain themselves. So you're saying that your infidelity was a response to her mistrust. Judge Lake asks, her tone neutral, but with an undercurrent that suggests she's not buying the explanation. Marcus runs a hand over his face, a gesture of frustration or perhaps exhaustion. I'm saying that the relationship became toxic, Your Honor. I'm saying that yes, I stepped out, and yes, I did things I shouldn't have done, but it didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened because I felt suffocated, because I felt like I was living with someone who was more interested in catching me doing something wrong than in actually being happy with me. And as for the woman whose things Carmen supposedly found in the house, that was a friend who needed a place to stay for one night because she was having problems with her boyfriend. Nothing happened between us, Your Honor. Carmen just assumed the worst because that's what she always does. Carmen's hand slams down on the table in front of her, and she's on her feet before anyone can stop her. That is a lie, she shouts, her voice cracking with emotion. You brought that woman into my home, into my bed, and you expect me to believe it was innocent. How stupid do you think I am, Marcus? How many times are you going to stand there and lie to my face? Judge Lake's gavel comes down again, and she points at Carmen. Ms. Martinez, sit down. I understand your anger, but you must control yourself in my courtroom. Carmen sits, but she's shaking with rage and hurt, and her mother wraps an arm around her shoulders, whispering something soothing in Spanish. Judge Lake returns her attention to Marcus, and now there's no mistaking the skepticism in her expression. Mr. Thompson, you admit to infidelity, but you claim that the most recent incident, the one that prompted Ms. Martinez to seek your removal from her home, was innocent. Do you have any evidence to support this claim? Any testimony from this alleged friend who needed a place to stay? Can you provide contact information so that we can verify your story? Marcus hesitates, and that hesitation speaks volumes. The truth is, Your Honor, I don't have her current number. We lost touch after that night, but I'm telling you the truth. Judge Lake's eyebrows raise slightly. How convenient, she says dryly. You claim innocence, but cannot provide any evidence or witness to support that innocence. Mr. Thompson, in my experience, when someone has nothing to hide, they have no trouble producing evidence of their innocence. The fact that you cannot or will not do so suggests to me that perhaps Ms. Martinez's version of events is closer to the truth than yours. But let's set aside the question of this most recent incident for a moment and focus on something else. You claim that you contributed financially to the household when you first moved in. Is that correct? Marcus nods, seeming relieved to move on to a different topic. Yes, Your Honor, I did. I paid half the utilities, I bought groceries, I even helped with repairs around the house. Judge Lake consults her file, and yet Ms. Martinez claims that 6 months ago, your contribution stopped. What changed? Marcus shifts his weight from one foot to the other, and it's clear that this is uncomfortable territory for him. I lost my job, Your Honor. I was laid off from the warehouse where I was working, and it took me a while to find new employment. During that time, yes, I couldn't contribute as much financially, but I was doing other things, helping out around the house, taking care of Sophia when Carmen was working. Judge Lake's expression is thoughtful. And when did you find new employment? Marcus hesitates again. I actually just started a new job 2 weeks ago, Your Honor. So for approximately 6 months, you were unemployed and unable to contribute financially to a household where you were living rent-free. Yes, Your Honor, but it's not like I was just sitting around doing nothing. I was looking for work. I was handling things around the house. Carmen can't contain herself any longer. He was not looking for work. She interjects, ignoring her attorney's hand on her arm. He was sleeping until noon, playing video games, going out with his friends, and apparently cheating on me with multiple women. I have bank statements showing that he was spending money at bars and clubs while telling me he was broke and couldn't help with bills. He had money for his own entertainment, but not for the household where he was living. Judge Lake holds up her hand, and the courtroom falls silent once more. This is a pattern I see far too often, she says, her voice taking on the tone of someone who is not just judging a case, but delivering a broader truth about human nature and relationships. A man moves into a woman's home, benefits from her hard work and sacrifice, and then, when confronted with his own failures, whether those failures are infidelity or financial irresponsibility or both, he attempts to shift the blame back onto the woman. He claims she was controlling when she was simply asking for basic respect and accountability. He claims she was paranoid when she was responding to red flags that any reasonable person would notice. Mr. Thompson, let me ask you something. Do you believe you have the right to live in Ms. Martinez's home even though you have betrayed her trust, failed to contribute financially for an extended period and brought other women into her private space. Marcus opens his mouth to respond, but Judge Lake isn't finished. And before you answer, let me remind you that this is not about legal tenant rights. This is about something much more fundamental. This is about respect, about gratitude, about recognizing that when someone opens their home to you, when they allow you into their life and into their child's life, you have an obligation to honor that gift, not to abuse it. The silence that follows is heavy with the weight of truth, and Marcus seems to shrink under Judge Lake's gaze. "Your Honor," he says finally, his voice smaller now, less defensive, "I know I messed up. I know I hurt Carmen, and I'm sorry for that. But where am I supposed to go? I don't have family in this area. I just started a new job. I don't have money saved for a deposit on a new place. If she kicks me out, I'll be homeless." And there it is, the appeal to sympathy, the attempt to make his homelessness the central concern rather than his betrayal of the woman who took him in. Carmen shakes her head in disgust. "That is not my problem," she says coldly. "You should have thought about where you would live before you decided to betray me in my own home." Judge Lake nods slowly. "Mr. Thompson, I understand that homelessness is a serious concern, and I don't take that lightly. However, Ms. Martinez is not responsible for your housing situation, particularly given the circumstances that led to this case. You made choices, and choices have consequences. Now, before I make my ruling on the eviction itself, there is another matter we need to address, something that Ms. Martinez included in her petition and that I believe goes to the heart of why this case is so painful, so contentious." She opens another folder and pulls out a document, and when she begins to speak again, there's a gravity to her words that makes everyone in the courtroom lean forward. "Ms. Martinez, in your petition, you state that during the time Mr. Thompson was living in your home, he formed a bond with your daughter Sophia, who began calling him Daddy, and who believed he was going to be a permanent part of her life. You state that this bond is now another source of pain for you because Sophia asks about him constantly. Doesn't understand why he can't come to her room anymore to read bedtime stories. Doesn't understand why everything has changed. Is that correct?" Carmen's eyes fill with tears, and this time she doesn't try to stop them from falling. "Yes, Your Honor," she whispers. "That's the worst part of all of this. I can handle him breaking my heart. I'm an adult. I'll survive. I'll heal eventually. But Sophia is 4 years old. She doesn't understand betrayal or infidelity or adult complications. All she knows is that the man she thought was her daddy is suddenly gone, and she thinks it's somehow her fault, that she did something wrong to make him leave. The emotion in the courtroom is palpable now, and even some of the most stoic audience members are wiping at their eyes. Judge Lake's expression is one of barely controlled anger, not the theatrical anger of someone playing to the cameras, but the genuine outrage of someone who has dedicated her career to protecting children from the collateral damage of adult dysfunction. "Mr. Thompson," Judge Lake says, turning to face him fully, "do you understand what you have done here? Do you understand that by inserting yourself into this child's life, by encouraging her to call you Daddy, by creating a bond with her and then betraying her mother in such a profound way, you have not just hurt Ms. Martinez, but you have hurt an innocent child who had already been abandoned by one father and who now faces the trauma of losing another." Marcus's face crumbles, and for the first time, he seems genuinely affected by the weight of his actions. "I love Sophia," he says, his voice breaking. "I never meant to hurt her. I wanted to be there for her. I wanted to be the father she deserved." Judge Lake's voice is sharp. "But you weren't thinking about what she deserved when you were cheating on her mother, were you? You weren't thinking about the example you were setting, about what message you were sending her about how men should treat the women they claim to love." The judge pauses, allowing her words to sink in, and then she continues in a tone that is both firm and measured. "There is something that troubles me deeply about this case. beyond the obvious betrayal and disrespect. What troubles me is the casual way in which adults allow their romantic and sexual choices to impact the children who depend on them for stability and security. Sophia did not ask for any of this. She did not ask for her biological father to abandon her. She did not ask for her mother to bring a new man into her life. She did not ask to form a bond with someone who would ultimately prove himself unworthy of her trust and her love. And yet she is the one who will carry the scars of these adult decisions for years to come. Studies show that children who experience multiple parental figures coming in and out of their lives suffer from attachment issues, trust issues, and a fundamental uncertainty about the stability of relationships. Ms. Martinez, I want to be clear that I am not blaming you for what happened. You did what many single mothers do. You tried to find a partner, someone who could help you shoulder the burden of parenthood, someone who could provide your daughter with a father figure. There is nothing wrong with wanting that. But what this case illustrates is the importance of being absolutely certain about someone's character before you allow them access to your child's heart. Carmen nods, tears streaming down her face, and when she speaks, her voice is thick with emotion and regret. Your Honor, I know that now. I see it so clearly now. I was so focused on wanting to give Sophia a complete family that I didn't take enough time to really know who Marcus was, to see the red flags that were probably there from the beginning. I let my own loneliness and my own desire for partnership cloud my judgment, and my daughter is paying the price for that. I will never forgive myself for putting her through this, and I promise you, Your Honor, I will never make the same mistake again. No one is getting close to my daughter until I am absolutely certain they are going to be there for the long haul. Judge Lake's expression softened slightly. Ms. Martinez, the fact that you can acknowledge your role in this situation speaks well of you. Too often people come into my courtroom looking only to blame the other party, refusing to examine their own choices and how those choices contributed to the situation they find themselves in. You have shown growth and self-awareness, and that gives me hope that you will indeed be more careful in the future. But the damage has been done, and now we must address how to move forward in a way that protects Sophia while also dealing with the legal and practical realities of Mr. Thompson's living situation. She turns back to Marcus, and her expression hardens again. Mr. Thompson, I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. Do you love Ms. Martinez? There is a long pause, and Marcus seems to be genuinely wrestling with the question, trying to find an answer that is both true and defensible. I care about her, he says finally. I care about both of them. But honestly, Your Honor, I think the love we had, if it was really love, died somewhere along the way. The constant fighting, the mistrust, the accusations, it killed whatever good feelings we had for each other. Judge Lake nods slowly, and yet you have fought to remain in her home. If the love is dead, if the relationship is toxic as you claim, why are you so resistant to leaving? Why not accept that it's over and move on? Marcus's jaw tightens, because I don't have anywhere else to go, Your Honor, and because despite everything that's happened, I care about Sophia, and I don't want to just disappear from her life without being able to explain to her that it's not her fault, that she didn't do anything wrong. The mention of Sophia seems to reignite Carmen's anger, and she stands up again, pointing at Marcus. You don't get to use my daughter as an excuse to stay in my house. You lost the right to be in her life when you disrespected her mother in her mother's own home. If you really cared about her, if you really loved her like you claim, you would have thought about her before you made the choices you made. You would have considered what your actions would do to her. But you didn't, Marcus. You thought about yourself, about what you wanted, about satisfying your own selfish desires, and now you want to play the caring father figure. It's disgusting. Judge Lake allows Carmen to finish, and then she gestures for her to sit down. The pain in this courtroom is almost overwhelming, and I can see that both of you are hurt, both of you are angry, both of you feel betrayed and misunderstood. But we are not here to relitigate your entire relationship. We are here to determine whether Mr. Thompson must vacate the premises. And if so, What reasonable timeline should be given for him to find alternative housing? However, before I make that ruling, there is one more issue that needs to be addressed, something that was mentioned in the initial paperwork, but that we have not yet discussed in detail. Judge Lake pulls out another document, and the atmosphere in the courtroom shifts perceptibly, as though everyone senses that we are approaching the true heart of the matter, the revelation that will redefine everything that has been said so far. Ms. Martinez, according to this document, there is some question about Sophia's paternity, not in relation to Mr. Thompson, but in relation to her biological father. Can you explain this to the court? Carmen looks confused for a moment, and then understanding dawns on her face. Your Honor, I'm not sure what that has to do with Marcus being evicted from my house. Sophia's biological father signed away his parental rights before she was even born. He wanted nothing to do with her, and he has never been part of her life in any way. I don't understand why that's relevant to this case. Judge Lake's expression is serious. It's relevant, Ms. Martinez, because according to Mr. Thompson's response to your eviction petition, he is claiming that during the time you were together, you told him that there was some uncertainty about Sophia's paternity, that the man you believed to be her father might not actually be her biological father. He is claiming that you told him this in confidence, and he is now suggesting that this uncertainty is relevant to the custody and visitation issues that will inevitably arise from your separation. The courtroom erupts in murmurs and gasps, and Carmen's face goes pale. That is a private conversation that Marcus had no right to bring into a courtroom, she says, her voice shaking with a mixture of anger and fear. That was something I shared with him in a moment of vulnerability, when I was trying to explain to him why Sophia's father wanted nothing to do with her. And now he's using it against me. Judge Lake raises her hand. Ms. Martinez, I understand that you feel your privacy has been violated, and I share your concerns about how this information has been introduced. However, if there is genuine uncertainty about Sophia's paternity, then it is relevant to her welfare and to any decisions about who should have access to her and under what circumstances. I am going to ask you directly, is there uncertainty about who Sophia's biological father is? Carmen looks at her mother, who is crying again, and then she looks down at her hands, and when she speaks, her voice is barely above a whisper. Yes, Your Honor, there is uncertainty. When I got pregnant with Sophia, I was in a brief relationship with a man named David Martinez, no relation to me despite the same last name. David and I were together for only about 3 months, and when I told him I was pregnant, he claimed the baby couldn't be his because he said he was sterile from a childhood illness. He accused me of cheating on him, and he said he wanted nothing to do with me or the baby. He signed away his rights, and I never heard from him again. Judge Lake leans forward, and was there someone else who could potentially be Sophia's father? Carmen's tears are flowing freely now, and the shame in her voice is palpable. Before I got together with David, I had a very brief encounter with someone else, a man I had known since high school. It was one night, one mistake, and I didn't think anything would come of it. When I got pregnant a few weeks later, I assumed it was David's baby because we were in a relationship, because that made sense, because I wanted it to be his. But David's reaction, his insistence that he couldn't have children, it planted a seed of doubt in my mind. And then, when Sophia was born, there were certain physical characteristics that didn't match David at all, but that did match the other man. I pushed those thoughts away because I didn't want to deal with the possibility that my daughter's father was someone I barely knew, someone who was already married with a family of his own. The revelation hangs in the air like a dark cloud, and the audience is completely silent, processing this unexpected turn in a case that already seemed impossibly complicated. Judge Lake's expression is one of deep concern. Ms. Martinez, have you ever attempted to establish paternity through DNA testing? Carmen shakes her head. No, Your Honor, I was afraid. Afraid of what the results might show, afraid of disrupting this other man's life, afraid of what it would mean for Sophia to know that her biological father didn't even know she existed. So I just convinced myself that David was her father, that his claims of sterility were just an excuse to avoid responsibility, and I moved on with my life. But the truth is, I don't know for certain who Sophia's father is. Judge Lake takes a deep breath, and when she speaks, there is no judgment in her voice, only a kind of weary understanding of how complicated human lives can become. Ms. Martinez, I want you to understand something. Every child has the right to know their biological heritage. Every child has the right to accurate medical history, to knowledge of their ancestry, to the possibility of a relationship with their biological family. By avoiding the question of Sophia's paternity, you have not protected her. You have denied her access to information that is rightfully hers. And while I understand your fears, while I understand that confronting this truth is painful and complicated, it is necessary. Children are not served by secrets and uncertainties. They are served by truth, even when that truth is difficult. Carmen is sobbing now, her entire body shaking with the weight of years of secrets and denial and fear. I know, Your Honor, she manages to say between sobs. I know I should have dealt with this a long time ago, but I was scared and I was ashamed, and I convinced myself that as long as Sophia had me, as long as she was loved and cared for, it didn't matter who her biological father was. But I see now that I was wrong. I see now that my fear and my shame have potentially deprived her of a relationship with her real father, and I will have to live with that knowledge for the rest of my life. Judge Lake's voice is gentle but firm. The question now is, what are you going to do about it? Are you prepared to have DNA testing done to establish Sophia's true paternity? Carmen wipes her eyes and nods. Yes, Your Honor. If you order it, I will comply. I will contact the man I believe might be her father, and I will ask him to submit to testing. And if he is her father, I will deal with whatever consequences come from that, even if it means his wife finds out, even if it means disrupting his family. Sophia deserves to know the truth, and I have been selfish in keeping that truth from her. Judge Lake nods approvingly. That is the right decision, Ms. Martinez, and I commend you for having the courage to make it. Now, Mr. Thompson, I want to return to you for a moment. Why did you feel it was necessary to bring this information about Sophia's paternity into these proceedings? What was your motivation? Marcus shifts uncomfortably, and it's clear that he's aware how his decision to reveal Carmen's secret makes him look. Your Honor, he says, I brought it up because I think it's relevant to the question of who should be in Sophia's life. Carmen has spent this whole case painting me as the bad guy, as someone who doesn't deserve to be around her daughter. But she's kept a secret from Sophia that could change everything about how that little girl understands herself and her family. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I've already admitted my mistakes. But I don't think Carmen has the moral high ground to decide who is and isn't worthy of being in Sophia's life when she's been lying by omission to her own daughter for 4 years. Judge Lake's expression hardens. Mr. Thompson, there is a significant difference between the mistakes you made and the situation Ms. Martinez finds herself in regarding Sophia's paternity. Your mistakes were active choices to betray and deceive. Her situation is more complicated. She made errors in judgment, certainly, but those errors came from fear and a misguided attempt to protect her daughter from painful truths. Moreover, your decision to expose her secret in a public courtroom setting, knowing how painful and humiliating this would be for her, does not speak well of your character or your claim that you care about this family. It appears to me that you revealed this information not out of concern for Sophia's welfare, but out of a desire to hurt Ms. Martinez, to deflect attention from your own failings by exposing hers. The truth of Judge Lake's words is written on Marcus's face, and he seems to shrink under the weight of her disapproval. You might be right about that, Your Honor, he admits quietly. I was angry. I felt like Carmen was making me out to be this terrible person, And I wanted her to understand that she wasn't perfect either, that she had made mistakes too. But you're right that my timing and my methods were wrong. I should have encouraged her to deal with the paternity issue privately, not exposed it in court. Judge Lake nods. At least you can acknowledge that, Mr. Thompson. Now I am going to take a brief recess to review the evidence and the testimony, and then I will return with my ruling on the eviction matter. I am also going to order DNA testing to establish Sophia's true paternity, and I am going to require MS. Martinez to contact the potential father and inform him of the situation. If he agrees to testing, we will reconvene in 30 days to review those results and determine what, if any, role he should have in Sophia's life. This court is in recess. The gavel comes down, and Judge Lake exits through the door behind the bench, leaving the courtroom buzzing with conversation and speculation. Carmen sits with her head in her hands, her mother's arm around her shoulders, and Marcus stands alone at his table, looking lost and uncertain. The weight of the moment is crushing, the realization that so many lives are about to change in fundamental ways based on the decisions and revelations of this day. After 15 minutes that feel like hours, the bailiff calls for everyone to rise, and Judge Lake returns to the bench. The courtroom falls silent immediately, everyone waiting with bated breath for the judge's ruling. I have reviewed all the evidence and testimony presented today. Judge Lake begins, her voice carrying the authority of someone who has carefully considered every aspect of a difficult case. And I am prepared to issue my ruling on the eviction matter, as well as to address the larger issues that have emerged during these proceedings. First, regarding the eviction, Mr. Thompson, I am ordering you to vacate MS. Martinez's residence within 30 days from today's date. You have demonstrated through your actions that you do not respect MS Martinez, her home, or the trust she placed in you. You have betrayed her repeatedly. You have failed to contribute financially to the household for an extended period, despite benefiting from her hospitality and hard work. And you have brought other women into her private space, violating the most basic boundaries of decency and respect. The fact that you are facing homelessness as a result of these choices is unfortunate, but it is a consequence of your own actions, not MS Martinez's responsibility. Judge Lake continues, her gaze fixed on Marcus with an intensity that makes it clear she wants him to fully understand the gravity of what she's about to say. During these 30 days, you will conduct yourself with respect and dignity in MS. Martinez's home. You will not bring any guests into the residence without her explicit permission. You will not approach Sophia or attempt to maintain your relationship with her unless MS Martinez specifically allows it. You will use this time to find alternative housing and to arrange for the removal of your belongings. If you violate any of these conditions, MS Martinez has the right to seek immediate removal through law enforcement. Do you understand these terms? Marcus nods, his voice barely audible when he responds. Yes, Your Honor, I understand. Judge Lake turns her attention to Carmen. MS Martinez, I want to address something with you as well. While I am ruling in your favor on the eviction matter, I must also speak to you about your responsibility in this situation, not regarding Mr. Thompson's behavior, which is entirely his fault, but regarding the larger issue of Sophia's paternity and welfare. You have an obligation as a mother to pursue the truth about your daughter's biological father. This is not optional. This is not something you can continue to avoid because it makes you uncomfortable or because it might complicate your life or someone else's life. Sophia has the right to know who her father is, to have access to her full medical history, to potentially have a relationship with her biological family. By avoiding this truth for 4 years, you have made a choice that prioritized your own comfort over your daughter's rights, and that is not acceptable. Carmen nods, fresh tears streaming down her face. I understand, Your Honor, and I promise I will contact the man I believe is Sophia's father within the week. I will explain the situation to him, and I will ask him to submit to DNA testing. And whatever the results show, I will deal with the consequences. I will put Sophia's needs first from now on, the way I should have been doing all along. Judge Lake's expression softens slightly. I believe you mean that, Ms. Martinez, and I hope you will follow through. Because this is not just about you anymore. This is about a 4-year-old child who deserves to have all the information about her identity, her heritage, and her family. Now I want to speak to both of you about something that transcends the legal issues we've addressed today, something that goes to the heart of what it means to be an adult and what it means to put children first. This case has laid bare the ways in which adults often allow their romantic and sexual desires, their emotional needs, and their personal conflicts to overshadow the needs of the children who depend on them. Mr. Thompson, you pursued a relationship with a single mother. You moved into her home. You allowed her daughter to bond with you and call you daddy. And then you betrayed that trust in the most profound way. Your actions have taught that little girl that the men who claim to love her and her mother cannot be trusted, that they will leave, that they will hurt the people they claim to care about. That is a lesson that will stay with her for years, possibly for the rest of her life. Marcus is openly crying now, and his voice cracks when he speaks. I never wanted to hurt Sophia, Your Honor. She was the best part of my relationship with Carmen. I loved reading to her at night. I loved taking her to the park. I loved being someone she could count on. And I know I messed that up. I know that my choices have hurt her, and I will regret that for the rest of my life. Judge Lake's voice remains firm. Regret is not enough, Mr. Thompson. What matters is what you do going forward. If you genuinely care about Sophia's welfare, the best thing you can do for her now is to exit her life quietly and allow her mother to provide the explanation and support that Sophia will need to process your absence. Do not try to maintain contact. Do not send gifts or messages. Let her heal without the confusion of continued interaction with someone who is no longer part of her daily life. That is the most loving thing you can do for her now. Marcus nods, wiping at his eyes. I understand, Your Honor. I'll stay away. Judge Lake then turns back to Carmen, and her expression becomes even more serious. Ms. Martinez, you have made mistakes as well, and it is important that you acknowledge them and learn from them. You brought a man into your daughter's life without taking sufficient time to really know his character, to see whether he was stable and committed and worthy of the role you were asking him to play. You ignored red flags because you were lonely, because you wanted to create a complete family, because you believed that having a father figure was more important than ensuring that father figure was the right person. Many single parents make this mistake, and I understand the impulse behind it, but it is a mistake nonetheless. The judge's words are measured and deliberate, each one chosen to drive home a point that extends far beyond this courtroom, far beyond this particular case. When you are a parent, especially a single parent, your romantic relationships cannot be solely about your own happiness and fulfillment. They must be evaluated through the lens of what is best for your child. Is this person stable? Are they kind? Are they patient? Do they have a history of keeping their commitments? Are they financially responsible? Do they respect you and the boundaries you set? These are not optional considerations. They are essential questions that must be answered before you allow someone access to your child's heart. And you must be willing to wait, to be alone if necessary, to prioritize your child's emotional safety over your own desire for companionship. I know that is hard. I know that being a single parent is lonely and exhausting, and that the desire to find a partner who can share the burden is powerful. But your daughter did not ask to be born. She did not ask to be raised by a single parent. She did not create the circumstances of her life. You did, through the choices you made and the relationships you entered into. Therefore, it is your responsibility to protect her, to shield her from the consequences of adult dysfunction and poor decision making, to ensure that anyone who enters her life is truly worthy of the trust she places in them. Carmen is nodding vigorously, her face wet with tears, but her expression one of acceptance and understanding. Your Honor, I hear you, and I accept everything you're saying. I made mistakes. I moved too fast with Marcus. I let my own needs cloud my judgment, and my daughter has suffered because of that. But I promise you, on everything I hold sacred, I will never make that mistake again. I will be more careful. I will take more time. I will prioritize Sophia's emotional safety above everything else, including my own loneliness or desire for companionship. And I will deal with the paternity issue, no matter how difficult it is, because you're right that she deserves to know the truth about who she is and where she comes from. Judge Lake nods approvingly. That is what I needed to hear from you, Ms. Martinez, and I believe you mean it. The pain I see in your eyes today is the pain of someone who has learned a difficult lesson and who is committed to doing better. That gives me hope for both you and Sophia. Now, before I close these proceedings, I want to speak to everyone in this courtroom, not just the parties involved in this case, but everyone watching, everyone listening, everyone who might find themselves in a similar situation now or in the future. If you were in this courtroom today, what decision would you make? If you were Carmen, would you have moved more slowly? Would you have insisted on more time to really know Marcus's character before allowing him into your home and your daughter's life? If you were Marcus, would you have recognized that when you enter a relationship with a single parent, you are not just committing to that parent, but to their child as well? Would you have understood that your actions would have consequences, not just for the adults involved, but for an innocent child who deserves better? The judge's words hang in the air, and it's clear that she's speaking not just to those present, but to a broader audience, to the thousands or millions of people who will watch this case unfold and who might see themselves in these stories of betrayal and poor judgment, and the collateral damage inflicted on children. The question of what it means to be a responsible adult, a responsible parent, a responsible partner, these are not abstract philosophical questions. They are practical, urgent matters that affect real lives, real children, real futures. Every choice you make, every person you bring into your life, every boundary you enforce or fail to enforce, these things matter. They shape the world your children grow up in, the lessons they learn about love and trust and commitment, the wounds they carry into adulthood. And too often, adults make decisions based on their own immediate needs and desires without fully considering the long-term impact on the children who depend on them. That is not acceptable. That is not good enough. If you choose to become a parent, whether through birth or through taking on a parental role in a child's life, you have an obligation to put that child's needs first, even when it costs you something, even when it means sacrificing your own happiness or convenience, even when it means being alone for longer than you would like. Judge Lake takes a breath, and then she continues with a final message that feels like both a verdict and a sermon. I am ordering Mr. Thompson to vacate Ms. Martinez's residence within 30 days. I am ordering Ms. Martinez to pursue DNA testing to establish Sophia's true paternity, and to contact the potential father within 1 week. And I am ordering both of you to consider carefully the lessons of this case, to think about how your choices have affected an innocent child, and to commit yourselves to doing better in the future. Because the truth is, the real victim here is not Ms. Martinez, as hurt and betrayed as she has been. The real victim is not Mr. Thompson, as homeless and displaced as he may become. The real victim is Sophia, a 4-year-old girl who has now lost 2 father figures, who has been lied to about her own identity, who has been exposed to adult dysfunction and conflict that she is too young to understand or process. She is the one who will carry the scars of your choices for years to come. She is the one who matters most, and both of you need to remember that every single day going forward, this court is adjourned. The gavel comes down with a finality that echoes through the chamber, and Judge Lake rises and exits, leaving Carmen and Marcus to face the consequences of everything that has been revealed. Carmen is immediately embraced by her mother, the 2 women clinging to each other as years of secrets and pain and fear come pouring out. Marcus gathers his papers slowly, looking small and defeated, and as he walks toward the exit, He glances back one more time at Carmen, perhaps hoping for some sign of forgiveness or understanding, but finding only her back turned to him as she seeks comfort in her mother's arms. The audience files out slowly, many of them visibly moved by what they have witnessed, and the courtroom empties until only the bailiff remains, preparing the room for the next case, the next story of human frailty and consequence, the next reminder that the choices we make ripple outward in ways we can never fully predict or control.